Our prelude this morning is played by Brock on our organ, our music director. So let us just sit back, take a deep breath, settle in, and enjoy. Beautiful, Brock. Thank you so much. It's such a joy to get to hear our Hope Jones organ this morning. Well, welcome. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and to serve the community. Whoever you are, we welcome you here this morning. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. And whatever is grieving your heart, wherever you are feeling some tenderness today, we welcome you here. We welcome all of you. It is good, it is good, it is good to be together this morning. Friends, if you are here for the first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Thank you so much for finding us today. We have a visitors forum that our usher, Cheryl Dunbar, just put a link to in the chat. Please fill it out so we can welcome you more broadly than just outside of this little box here and welcome you more broadly into our community. It is great to have you with us this morning. It's great to have all of you with us this morning. So as we gather, please take a moment to just pop into the chat and offer a greeting this morning. Just a hello, a wave, I'm here, whatever you need to say. We just want to see that you're here and be able to welcome you here. It is good. It is really good to be together. Welcome. Welcome to worship at First Universalist Church. Our opening hymn this morning is hymn number 1002, Comfort Me. I feel like this hymn is just a hymn for these days and for this time, for moments when we are in need of a bit of comfort from one another or just even from ourselves. So as we join hearts and voices in singing together this morning, let us create a song across our city of Rochester, the country, and the world. Let us sing together hymn number 1002, Comfort Me.
Comfort Day, March 13th came. Most of us had calendars filled with a 10 a.m. Tuesday, or a 3:30 p.m. Thursday, or an 8 p.m. Saturday night concert, and of course, a 10:30 a.m. Sunday church. Then the winds of change blew the calendar to March 14th. A positive COVID test of a school district employee was reported, and everything was erased from our lives. Wash hands, wear masks, and stay-at-home guidelines were issued. For weeks, we went on just like that, staying home, except perhaps for essential trips to get groceries. Life was flipped inside out. What was normal was abnormal. What was abnormal was the new normal. In her book on death and dying, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross called the first stage of grief denial and isolation. I know I watched the television news in disbelief as the numbers grew. This can't be happening to us and to everyone all over the world. As we sat inside, many people sat alone with nothing to do and no people to see. Then the isolation deepened. How could we handle this without being in touch with people? Here, we handle it with Zoom Church. Even though it is not perfect, we can still worship together, which can dispel some of the isolation. So come, let us join our hearts, feel the warmth of community, and worship together. As we light our chalice, will you join me in saying our chalice lighting words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please join me in our affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. When the COVID pandemic shut down our world, we lost something very precious. We lost the illusion that we have control over our lives. We knew what we were doing and when, but really, all that could be changed in an instant, and it was. What we do have control of is our support for this church. We are members of a church which will support us and the people of the community when we feel isolated and alone. If there is anything that we have learned from this pandemic, it is that we cannot do it alone. This place is a very important part of the Rochester community. We need this place to be here for ourselves and for the community at large. The people who came before us preserved it for us. We need to keep it here for today and all the days going forward. please click the link in the chat to give online to First Universalist Church, or feel free to send a check to the church.
Good morning, friends. Our worship theme for this month is grief. And there are lots of things that we can feel grief about. Besides the loss of someone we love, there's the loss of little things that we love. Like, for me, being able to see friends or family members because of the pandemic that I can't. For my kids, they grieve when they outgrow clothes they love or toys that are old break. I have friends and family members who grieve when they lose things or there's things that they can't do anymore because they've grown up or gotten older. And there's lots of ways to feel grief. Besides being sad, we can also feel angry, and sometimes we just feel grumpy and we're not even sure why. One of the ways to help with processing those feelings are to experience things with our senses. Our sense of hearing and sight and smell and taste and touch. And so the character in our story today does that because they wake up feeling grumpy. Our story today is Grumpy Tortoise by Michael Buxton. It's one of Walter's favorites. Tortoise woke up feeling very grumpy and decided to go for a walk. In the meadow, Tortoise smelt the flowers and felt a little less grumpy. In the mountains, Tortoise listened for the echo, 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 and felt a little less grumpy. In the desert, Tortoise soaked up the warmth of the sun and felt a little less grumpy. On the ocean, Tortoise enjoyed the cool breeze and a friend, and felt a little less grumpy. In the city, Tortoise sped along, zoom, and felt a little less grumpy. In the forest, Tortoise shared a snack with friends and felt a little less grumpy. What a wonderful day. It was time for bed, and Tortoise didn't feel grumpy at all. The end.
I want to invite you for just a moment to take a breath with me as we enter into this reverent time of sharing the joys and the sorrows of this gathered community. If you would like, you can place a hand over your heart to be able to listen from this heart-centered place as we share in some of the joys and sorrows. As I place stones into a jar, I will read aloud the joys and the sorrows of our gathered community. All are invited, of course, to share in the chat, and I have a few joys and sorrows to share out loud, and perhaps I will also read some from the chat as folks share. So let us enter into this reverent time of sharing in the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. I will drop one stone for a joy from Jane Hickok. Her great-granddaughter, Layla, was born last Saturday, October 3rd. Her mother is Jane's older granddaughter, Heather. Congratulations, Jane and the Hickoks. A joy from Tom Williams to have coffee this week with 3 friends from church. We so enjoyed their company. Both a mixed joy and a fear from Tess McFarland Porter, so we'll do 2 stones. A joy that their oldest, David, has been able to stay with them and to work remotely for the past few weeks. A fear and feeling scared that he will need to head back to his home in Wisconsin to vote, where the health system is overwhelmed with COVID. A joy that from John Luke that their corgi Andy is recovering from a serious health challenge, wishing Andy well. And a joy to walk through Corbett's Glen yesterday from Michael and Kelly Scott. Sorrow from Jean Ott that Ontario and Quebec provinces are experiencing resurgence of COVID. Her niece is living in Toronto and studying for her PhD. Jean, we will keep your niece in our thoughts. Janice Mary shares that almost all of the political signs of one particular party have been stolen in Wyoming County. So we will keep Wyoming County and its voters in our thoughts and in our hearts. A joy to see so many folks outside yesterday, enjoying a perfect day from Karen Labraco. Oh yes, and a joy from Joanna Connolly. Happy Coming Out Day. Hope it inspires others. Hope it creates a safer world for us all. And I shall drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all of the joys and the sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in a heart of love. Friends, I want to invite you now to take a deep breath with me as we enter into a time of prayer, meditation, a time to strengthen our spirits and to just sit with our hearts. And this is a meditation for our times. I am still speaking. A powerful statement of hope, a stance of strength, a way forward that says no woman will be interrupted, a disruption that our hearts so deeply needed. I'm still speaking. A balm to our hearts, what needs to be said inside of you? What is longing to come forth, to come out of the shadows? What do you feel you need to draw on your deepest strength to say? I'm still speaking. A reminder of our agency, a desire for better, for more spaciousness. We are expansive and we get to be expansive. To take up space with our delight. To answer our own calls for pleasure, joy, laughter, gladness. I'm still speaking. A cry for justice in a country in such deep need. A call for strength in times when we long to be heard. A love of self and others. So deep, we will draw boundaries and a line that says, this is where I am. I'm still speaking. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. And let us now take a moment to listen to our hearts as they speak to us in the imperfect, shared silence that is essential to our time together. Let us join in this silence, making space for the expanse and the multitudes that we all contain. Please join us in our hymn of contemplation, hymn number 336, All My Memories of Love.
All my memories of love hang upon high stars. All the souls I've lost to tears now the autumn jars. And the air around me here begins with their song. Sing again their nameless tunes, sing again and strong. Willows in September touch the water clear, set among the rushes top of the flowing year. Rising up from sunlit masses comes the shadowed sun, running toward me silently, love to fortify. Many are the graceful hearts hung upon this tree, and it seems there's room for all on these branches free. And the style of the tree, whether wet or bright, is my ease and comforting, my good news and light.
Our reading this morning is The Guest of Grief by Monica Dobbins. And she begins it with a quote. Anyone who has lost something they thought was theirs forever finally comes to realize that nothing really belongs to them. That's from Paulo Coelho. Ever since the beginning of this school year, I've had a hard time getting ready in the morning. Hard time getting out of bed, unfocused, glued to my phone, just wasting time generally. I've easily recognized that this is a weird behavior for me. I'm a morning person and a go-getter overall, but couldn't put my finger on why I was doing this. This morning, it finally dawned on me, it's grief. I've been unconsciously grieving the fact that my daughter no longer needs my help getting ready for school. She gets up by her alarm, gets dressed by herself, makes her own breakfast and lunch, and heads out the door on time and walks to school by herself. Since she was in kindergarten, she and I have always gotten ready together in mirror fashion, doing the same things at the same time so that she could develop an independent routine, and so that I didn't spend mornings yelling at her. It was just easier with one kid to do everything together. That's not happening now, and it probably won't ever again. I hadn't really processed what that means until now. On the one hand, it means freedom. Sleep later, do yoga in the morning, leave early and have coffee out somewhere. I'm looking forward to a time when I can embrace those possibilities. But first, I need to feel this grief, embrace it for a while, and then think about what life will be like as she grows in independence and wisdom. I need to think about letting go gracefully. Sometimes grief sends notice ahead of time. Sometimes it shows up as an unwelcome, uninvited guest. Either way, I know in my head that grief always has love in its suitcase. And if I let it, it will unpack that love for me to look at and admire. Oh, Brack, I love hearing you play the piano. It's such a joy. Well, friends, it's so good to be with you all this morning. I am actually not in Rochester today. I am tuning in with you all from a hotel in Brockton, Massachusetts, as I've come out here to celebrate my grandmother's 95th birthday with a surprise party later on this afternoon. So just remembering that sacred community is wherever we find ourselves. I'm grateful for that reminder this morning. Yesterday, I had the distinct honor and pleasure of performing a child dedication in a friend's backyard. It was a much needed reminder that even in the midst of all that is going on, life continues. The creation of life continues. Family life continues. This small baby, full of wonder, new to the world, is being dedicated to a community of family and friends who will take care of him, love him, nurture him. It was a joyous occasion, and I feel like we need those now more than ever. And it was also a reminder of how much has changed in the course of just 8 months. We were doing this dedication in a backyard rather than in a church. Each one of us was so grateful for that beautiful weather yesterday. Everyone was masked and sitting physically distant from one another. We were taking some family photos after the ceremony, and the mother, who is my friend, a dear friend, said, "I'm smiling in all these photos, but no one can tell because they can't see my mouth." So much has changed. And with change comes grief. This is one of those weeks where it feels like my role as minister to you all is about providing some sort of a holy mirror, a reflection back to you about what I am hearing from you. This is not always my role with you. Some mornings I am here as truth teller, other mornings as a comfort, other times even in more of an educational mode. There are times, though, when what we are sitting with collectively is too big to keep to just one of us, or even to just keep within an email or a phone call. There are major parts of this moment we are all experiencing that I want to explore with you this morning. And much of it centers around ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss refers to moments when we are grieving, but there has not been a straightforward death of a loved one. It is the loss we feel when we are looking towards an uncertain future, not quite knowing how and when we will come back together again. Ambiguous loss more commonly refers to instances in our lives when we have lost someone and are unsure that they are truly gone. Like when a loved one in the military might go missing, or even when someone in our lives has lost their mental capacity, but they're still physically present. Today, we are talking more about the losses we are experiencing in everyday life. Grief over how we used to do things. Grief over how we once experienced the world. Grief that comes when we recognize just how much has changed. I reached out to you all this past week in my weekly email and asked you to share with me some ways where you are experiencing ambiguous loss, some ways you are experiencing this in your lives. And the responses were so profound and so resonant. I really wanted to share them with all of you. This feels too big to just keep to myself. And I'm so grateful for each one of you who found space and capacity to respond to me. And I also just want to acknowledge that this time is overwhelming. If you thought of sending something to me and then it just slipped your mind until now, that sounds like a common state of mind for many of us, if not most of us. There's just so much to keep track of. And so much is overwhelming, or even if you were just overwhelmed at being asked to share your experiences of ambiguous loss, you are not alone. And if you are here at church for the first or the second time and you are not receiving our emails yet, I hope that some of what I heard can speak to your hearts as well, as I imagine so many of us are having similar experiences. So here's some of what I learned from you. To name ambiguous loss is to acknowledge the loss that comes with our own aging. It is to feel the grief of not having your body respond as quickly as it used to, the prolonged experience of healing, a deeper reliance on medical professionals and medical help, a wondering about where our energy has gone when we used to feel so full of life and vitality. To name ambiguous loss is to acknowledge the loss we feel as we see our children grow, much like our reading talked about. Watching a child no longer play with their childhood toys, yet not wanting to throw them away just in case, perhaps keeping them in a box somewhere. Watching a daughter grow into self-consciousness about her body, gaining a new filter on her words and actions, and losing some of the freedom of just being a kid. To name ambiguous loss is to name the grief following the election in 2016 and the times that have followed. Grieving a sense of decency and feeling a loss of who you thought your neighbors are. It harkens to times in one's life when a line has been drawn that separates in ways that are both confusing and call upon our deepest held values at the same time. Some of you expressed anticipatory grief around the winter time, how different our lives will look this winter. and the loss of the sun, which has been such a source of energy for us this past year. This held alongside an anticipatory grief about the winter holidays, wondering what that celebration will look like. To name ambiguous loss is to acknowledge the loss of visits to touch point places in our lives, the loss of not getting to see those we love in person, the wondering when we will get to see these loved ones at all, missing out on important milestones and important growth with grandchildren or even surrogate grandchildren. I wonder if you know these losses. And I wonder if you know more. I wonder if your experience speaks to even more than what I can name this morning. I wonder if you have had space or time to acknowledge them. One person reached out to me with a whole list they had made around loss of connections and loss of freedom of choice. I wonder if making such a list might help each of us to make space to speak or at least acknowledge the unspoken grief in our days. I wonder what it would look like for all of us to take these sources of grief that have been swimming around in our heads and in our hearts and to bring them out into the light of day through journaling or sharing with someone or whatever method might suit you. I wonder what it may look like to speak the unspoken. My experience has been that sometimes this unspoken grief creeps up on me until I have a moment to build some awareness. Like Monica Dobbins writes about, it can show up in our different behavior characteristics. It can show up in behavior that is uncharacteristic to us, wasting time in the morning, feeling more edgy with others, a reaction that was much bigger than the situation that was before us, an unexpected, uninvited guest. I think this kind of grief doesn't have an exact moment we can point to. Unlike the death of a loved one where we can say, this was the time and the date when that death occurred, with ambiguous loss, it's a bit sneakier than that. It shows up in these sideways behaviors until we take a moment to pause and take notice of what is going on inside of us. Our responses to these unspoken griefs can just feel like some sort of a new pattern or a malaise or a tiredness or a grumpiness that we cannot explain. If it goes unacknowledged or unprocessed, it has the potential to cause deep harm, sickness in our bodies, depression, anxiety. We must make space for the unspoken grief. We must take time to pause and to process, to notice where it is showing up for us, and we must make time for tears. Joan Chittister wrote a beautiful article this past week about the need for tears. From her Catholic perspective, she wrote about Jesus crying and weeping for the city of Jerusalem. And she encouraged us to cry in the midst of all that is changing: a pandemic, job loss, mass evictions, sickness, vast inequities in income and security and quality of life. She writes, weeping is a very holy and life-giving thing. It sounds alarms for a society and wisens the soul of the individual. Ecclesiastes may be nowhere more correct than here. There is definitely a time for weeping. If we do not weep on the personal level, we shall never understand humanity around us. If we do not weep on the public level, we are less than human ourselves. If we do not weep on the personal level, we shall never understand humanity around us. If we do not weep on the public level, we are less than human ourselves. To push away the tears, to shoulder on through the grief denies our common humanity. To weep wisens our souls. It gives life. It connects us to our neighbors and our larger human community beyond those we can even see and comprehend. We must take time to mourn and to weep. Let the tears come. People have been living with ambiguous loss well before this time period, and there is much wisdom to draw on from how to cope and process and continue living our lives. One of the major key recommendations is to shift our expectations of ourselves. Grieving takes a toll, it takes space. We are not going to be as productive or as engaged as we might have been when we weren't living with so much. Another way to live with all this loss is to recognize where you are in your grieving process. Folks always cite those 5 stages of grief that Patty alluded to earlier: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Check in with yourself and see where you are at. It's no linear process, so we can shift from one to the other in a matter of days or even hours, or sometimes, the way this world is working right now, moment to moment. Tara Hale, who is a science journalist, interviewed this amazing woman, Pauline Boss, who is an expert at ambiguous loss. When talking about acceptance, Pauline Boss shared she herself has not gotten to a place of acceptance with this. How could she? How can we? What she encouraged as a part of acceptance is to allow ourselves to have a good time anyway. To hold both that yes, the world is changing and shifting and we are grieving, and there are just things we need to do to enjoy life anyway. Share a snack with friends, distanced of course, and outdoors. Make time to get out into the mountains, go to the sea. We have to do what brings us joy anyway. One woman in our church shared that her response to ambiguous loss has been to make gratitude lists at the end of each day, a practice that keeps her focus on what went well. I wonder where you are finding practices and creative outlets that are helping you through this time. Perhaps you are someone who likes to make things with their hands, or who enjoys writing, or who loves to make music. Perhaps you are someone who loves all of those things. Perhaps there are some creative practices you used to have time for that you can create more space for now, or even just return to. I hope you are finding ways to enjoy these beautiful fall colors and to strengthen relationships with family and friends that will carry us through this. Those relationships, these communities are essential to who we are and how we are going to make it through this. We cannot spend all of our time in the depths of it all. It's important to go there, don't get me wrong. I love the depths of it all. But it's also important to find balance and equilibrium in our lives as well. Places and spaces for joy and delight and gladness. What I wish for each of you is to know your grief, know it and befriend it, and maybe even explore it a little. I wish for you to make space and time to weep and to mourn. And I wish you also these balances of restorative practices, the balance of relationships, the counterweight of joy and delight. May you find each of these in the days to come. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. And I know for me and for many of us, one of the ways that we find joy and delight is in singing together. And though we may miss seeing the choir process down the aisle and sing with us in front of us, I know that at least it is important now for us to keep singing. We have to keep singing. So let us join in our final hymn this morning, hymn number 391, Voice Still and Small. We invite you to remain muted and sing out joyfully from home, again, creating a collective song from wherever we find ourselves.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Friends, as we extinguish our chalice flames this morning, wherever you are, if you have a chalice flame, feel free to join us in extinguishing yours as well. Let us read together the words printed in your order of service and on your screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Until we are together again, my friends, let us keep connecting. Let us keep staying connected to one another. So I'll invite you to turn your screen to gallery view wherever you are. Click on the little button in the corner and turn your screen to gallery view so you can see all the faces that are here. And let us just reach out to the edge of our screens and connect with one another. And let us take a deep breath. Friends, may you go forth this week with hearts that are full. May you know where you are in your grief. May you find ways to speak it and to name it. And may you also find balance in your life with joy, with gladness, with delight, with connections. May you go forth from this sacred virtual space knowing you are loved and bringing that love wherever you go. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. And friends, as we close our service this morning, I'll invite you to just type into the chat this morning, I carry the flame. May you carry the flame with you wherever you are headed this week.